Chapter 16. Ning, seeing the young man slowly coming over, Xiao and her group slowed to a halt. Their previous laughter had also died out. The young girls by Zime's side widened their eyes while looking at the young man that was once the clan's pride. The expressions on their faces were varied, from sympathy to something else. Xiao stopped in place. In her mind, she still felt attached and wanted to chat with the young man that had once captured her heart. But reality told her that the difference between the two of them was too large for them to be together, and wasting time on a cripple isn't exactly smart. Her brows furrowed before relaxing. In Zime's mind she thought, let's say hi, no matter what, he's still my Bajie. Ignorant to Zime's thoughts, Xian still had his hands behind his head and was lazily walking over. Watching the ever-closer Xian, a smile appeared on Zime's face, but the actions of the young man froze the smile on her small face, making it seem as if she was making a weird face. With both hands behind his head, Xian ignored the group and looked straight as he walked past the young girls without any hesitation. Opening her red, small mouth at the young man's shadow, Xiao was shocked. With her beauty, when had she ever had such a horrible treatment? She felt an embarrassed anger and couldn't help but yell, "Xian Bajie!" Stopping, Xian didn't turn around and his bland tone was emotionless, as if he was talking to a stranger. "What?" The emotionless and bland voice stunned Xiao and she whispered, "Nothing." Xian's brows jumped, but he shook his head and started walking forward again. Watching the disappearing shadow, Xiao angrily stomped her feet and went onto a different path. Rounding a turn, Xian looked up to a spacious room. On the plaque of the room were 3 flamboyant and blood-red words, "Do Technique Hall." Hearing the yells within the Do Technique Hall, Xian was quite surprised. Normally, no one came to the hall, so why was it so noisy today? Shrugging his shoulders, Xian stepped forward and entered the Do Technique Hall. Once Xian went inside the hall, quite a few cheers from other clan members greeted him. The Do Technique Hall was split into an east and west section. In the east section were the clan's Do techniques, while the west section was a large training field. Right now, there were quite a few people gathered around the training field and watching to people at the middle of the field. Looking at the density of Ningji's Do Che, is he at 8 Duan Che? Hey, just 2 months ago, Ning Bajie got to 8 Duan Do Che. But even though he has 8 Duan Do Che, Zana Baomi has 9 Duan Do Che. Ning Bajie doesn't have a high chance of winning. Good luck, Zana Baomi. Hearing the voices from the crowd, Xian paused his footsteps and glanced around at the training field. Finally, his interested gaze landed on the young girl wearing a light purple dress. How does she have the time to fight with others? Xian thought in his mind before going to the east side of the hall and taking a random, black scroll from a shelf. Opening up the scroll, large yellow words appeared. Middle yellow, Shattering Rock Hand. Lazily leaning on the bookshelf, Xian read the training methods to the Shattering Rock Hand while occasionally glancing at the ferocious battle in the training field. The spacious hall seemed to be separated into 2 worlds. The west side was noisy while the east side was peaceful and calm. Zana's opponent was a young man at about the age of 17 to 18. He was quite handsome and similar to Jia Leo, who Xian had seen the other day. The young man was called Ning and was the top elder's grandson. Even though he was only 17, he had already gotten to 8 Duan Che, and in the entire clan, only Zana was better than him. Xian had a neutral impression of this Bajie. They only occasionally met and always said customary greetings before hurrying off. Maybe it was because of the unfriendly atmosphere between his father and the top elder, but Xian was always able to feel animosity emanating from him. But while Xian was crippled, he had never went out of his way to taunt or tease Xian. Lightly smiling, Xian discarded his thoughts and went back to studying the Shattering Rock Hand. On the training field, Zana was like a light purple butterfly that avoided the swift attacks by Ning gracefully and elegantly. However, on her delicate face, no emotions, such as weariness or the like, surfaced. After blocking another one of Ning's attacks, Zana's gaze lazily swept across the hall, but suddenly her movement stopped. Seeing the absorbed young man in the east side of the hall, a light and elegant smile floated onto Zana's face. The girl's sudden smile made the spectators stunned at the beauty of Zana. "Zana Baomi, watch out!" Right when Zana was distracted, a young voice called out from within the crowd. Feeling the violent pressure coming from behind her, Zana furrowed her brows, but her gaze stayed on the young man below the bookshelf. At the same time, Xian had lifted his head and seeing the sneak attack directed at Zana, he furrowed his brows and shook his head. His look revealed a restrained worrying. Seeing the worried look on Xian's face, Zana mischievously blinked her beautiful eyes. Suddenly, she took a small step toward the left. Even though it was just a step, it strangely helped her dodge all of Ning's attacks. While she was dodging, her clear white hands sparkled gold and went straight between Ning's hands and lightly landed on his chest. Turning around in a circle, Zana gracefully counteracted the force while Ning had to step back a dozen steps and out of the training field. To be able to defeat Ning with one attack, the spectators all gave thunderous applause to Zan. Hehe, Zana Bao Miai is really at the top in the younger generation of the clan. You're really strong. Even though Ning had just been defeated by Zana, he had a smile as he walked back to the middle of the training field. Calmly looking at the girl in front of him, the fervent love in Ning's eyes wasn't hidden at all. Even though they were technically Baozhe Miai, Ning knew that in the entire clan, many of the members didn't have close blood relations, and for Zana, he knew that she wasn't related by blood to him. As if she didn't feel the fervent gaze of Ning, Zana respectfully shook her head and said, Ning Baozhe let me win. After saying that, she didn't wait for a response from Ning and went straight to the eastern part of the hall with a big smile. Being the center of attention, Zana's movements were detected by everyone, and following the intended path of Zana, they found Xian. Even though Xian was now the center of attention to the previous spectators, Xian didn't look up and was absorbed in his own world. Chapter 17. Conflict. Xian Zheizhe. The young girl shyly stood in front of Xian while her delicate, white hands fluttered behind her. She slightly leaned forward and her beautiful eyes twinkled into crescent moons. On her beautiful face were two light dimples. Shifting his gaze from the scroll in front of him, Xian peered at the young girl in front of him and then turned his gaze to include the entire hall. Seeing the fervent stares aimed at him, he couldn't help but say, "Girl, I know your charm is quite large, but you don't need for me to share it, do you?" TL. The girl used by Xian isn't a mean nickname, but a common and familiar saying to younger female family members. Hehe. Smiling, Zana sat next to Xian and lazily stretched backwards, causing her charming curves to be revealed by her tight outfit. Randomly taking a scroll from the bookshelf, Zana stared at Xian before asking, Xian Zheizhe got to 4th Duan Cha. Hearing that, Xuan, who was absorbed by his scroll, looked up. For the first 10 Duan Che, the Do Che stays weak and almost undetectable. Unless one actively used Do Che or an examination monument was used, it is impossible to find out what Duan Che someone has. But just a moment ago, Zana only looked at Xiao for a couple of seconds and determined what Duan Che he was at. Very surprising. This girl, who is she? The Do techniques that she had just used in her fight with Ning was definitely a high-level Do technique and definitely not one owned by Z clan. Thinking about the few inconsistencies with Zana, Xuan tilted his head to look at the smiling Zana beside him. Shrugging his shoulders, he nodded. 4th Duan. Seeing Xian nod, the smile on Zana's face widened and she said, "It's related to your training for the past half-month, right?" "Yeah." Slightly nodding, Xian didn't deny it and returned his gaze to the scroll while asking, "How do you have the time to come out and compete with someone? I'm bored." Imitating Xian's shrugs, Zana smiled while showing a sorrowful face. After last time, Xian Zheizhe hasn't come to see Zana. Are you afraid that Zana will force you to return the money? Xian paused and awkwardly laughed. The coming-of-age ritual is next year. So do you think I have time to not train? Raising his head and seeing the sad face on Zana, he lightly patted Zana's head and whispered, "I'll try to find time to be with Zana from now on." Hearing Xian's promise, Zana's small face relaxed. But her talk with Xian had made every single person in the hall red-eyed at Xian. Looking at the two of them below the bookshelf, Ning's face was extremely ugly and his hand curled into fists before relaxing and then curled them back up again. Being the grandson of the top elder of the clan, Ning had always felt that he was special. Towards Zana, Ning had already, in his own mind, set her as his wife. Of course it was one-sided. But seeing his wife was flirting with someone else made Ning extremely envious. More importantly, the person whom Xuan was flirting with was the cripple of the clan. As rage surged in his eyes, Ning let out a huge breath and put on a calm and welcoming smile. Adjusting his messy clothes, he walked towards the two under the eyes of everyone in the hall. In the hall, the spectators happily smirked when they saw Ning walking towards Xuan and Xian. Of course, their smirks were not directed at Ning, but rather at the seemingly ignorant Xian. Gazing over the chopads depicted on the scroll, Xian memorized the pressure points and chopads necessary for shattering rock hand. Letting out a breath, Xian's originally relaxed brows furrowed. With his strong soul perception, Xian was able to observe the actions of everyone within the hall, including Ning who was walking towards him. This girl brings so much trouble. Sighing, Xian rolled up the scroll in his hand. Hehe, Xian Baodi, are you here to learn Do techniques? Do you need me to help you find a couple of high-leveled ones? For some of the techniques, I don't think that you have the right to access them. Smiling in front of Xian, Ning spoke arrogantly. TL, Baodi is the young version of Baozhe, which is older brother not in one's immediate family. Xian placed the scroll back onto the bookshelf and shook his head. Thanks for the offer, but I don't think I need them right now. Oh, hehe, I forgot. Xian Baodi only has 3 Zhuanshe, so it would be pretty hard to learn high-level techniques. Lightly massaging his forehead, Ning smiled. The ridicule in his tone was also displayed on his face. Xian sighed again. Ning was ridiculing him on purpose. A slight curve appeared on Xian's face while he said, I know you're trying to get Xuan's attention, but I have to say, you are quite childish. Hearing the ruthless words of Xian, Ning's face darkened. He had never thought that the normally silent Xian would have the courage to stand up against him. He sneered and said, looks like Xian Baodi has an opinion about me. How about we test out our skills? It'll help me see how much Baodi has improved in the past few years. Shall I test my skills against you? Placing down her scroll, Xuan looked up coldly. Ning's eyelid jumped when he saw Xuan speaking up for Xian. With his envy burning even higher, Ning taunted, do you only know to hide behind women? Why didn't you dare to say such things 3 years ago? Xian tiptoed to reach for another scroll, blowed off the dust on it, and emotionlessly replied to Ning. To be honest, Xian's emotionless and relaxed appearance, in the eyes of people who aren't too friendly with him, made them feel as if there was something stuck on their chest. Ning grinded his teeth together, making GG sounds, but even though he was enraged, he didn't dare hurt Xian since no matter how horrible Xian's talent was, he was still the son of the clan leader. Taking a deep breath, Ning stared at Xian and coldly said, Xian, you're no longer the genius you were 3 years ago. You right now, a cripple. You don't deserve Xuan. If you are a man, then you would leave right now. Or else, hehe, even though I can't fight you right now, next year, when you perform the coming-of-age ritual, you have to accept the challenge by a clansman. If you don't want to become a real cripple, then I would suggest for you to get out of here right now and go hide in some poor remote place where you'd live out the rest of your life. Hearing the threats Ning made, the edges of Xian's mouth curved upwards and he tilted his head to inspect Ning with a strange gaze. Afterwards, he rolled his eyes, picked up the scroll and walked outwards. Seeing Xian's movements, Ning believed that Xian had grudgingly agreed to his words, but before he could celebrate his victory, a sentence came from Xian's mouth and made Ning's face green. All right, next year, try to beat me into a cripple. Chapter 18, Xuan High-Level Do Technique, Octane Blast. Ignoring the cold gazes behind him, Xian hugged the scroll and checked it out with the manager of the Do Technique Hall. Then, he, along with Xuan, lazily walked out of the hall while chatting. Brat, just wait. When you get kicked out of the clan, I'll have all the time in the world for revenge. Without the clan leader's protection, you are nothing. Watching the disappearing Xian, Ning felt a fury burn in his chest. As if to show his dedication, he smacked the bookshelf next to him, leaving a light handprint. After leaving the Do Technique Hall, Xian first accompanied Xuan to nearby mountains for an entire afternoon before going back to his room when the sky turned dark. After getting back to his room and closing the door, Xian's shoulders sagged down. After placing his scroll on a nearby table and drinking a cup of tea, he fearfully said, "This girl, she sure can walk." "That girl's history isn't normal either." An old voice resounded through the room. Tiredly raising his head and seeing the ghost-like Yao Lo, Xian curled his lips and asked, "Does teacher know her history?" "Hey, I think I know a bit." Yao Lo smiled, but when he saw Xian's curious glance, he said, "Don't ask. It's useless to you right now. So, it's better if you don't waste your effort on it. What I can say is that her background is pretty powerful." Rolling his eyes, Xian gave Yao Lo a middle finger. "Why did you go get this trash? Do you think that you have a lot of time?" Yao Lo came to the table and flipped through the scroll, only to be appalled by it. "Trash!" Xian cried out. "Besides vacuum hand, I don't know any other Do techniques. Before, I only knew to train restlessly and didn't know any Do techniques, and only the Huang level Do techniques can be learned by anyone in the clan. If I don't learn these, what would I use to defeat others in the coming-of-age ritual?" "Oh, so you want to swindle a Do technique from me?" The shrewd Yao Lo understood Xian's intent immediately. Even though Xian had his plan exposed, he didn't pretend as if that wasn't his plan and instead looked at Yao Lo with puppy eyes. "What's so great about Do techniques? Once you learn alchemy, people will be fighting to gift you high-level Do techniques." Yao Lo lightly smiled and ignored the ever-darkening face of Xian. "But I need high-level Do techniques. Right now?" Xian said depressedly. Seeing the sad Xian, Yao Lo laughed cheerfully. "Whatever, after all you are my student, although somewhat pitiful. So that you don't become a cripple, I'll teach you something." Hearing that, Xian perked up. He was very curious as to what kind of Do technique his mysterious teacher would give him. Even though your vacuum hand is Xuan level, it's somewhat weak for a technique at that level. "Since your Do Che isn't too strong right now, I'll teach you a Do technique that's at the Xuan level but only needs for you to be at 5 Duan Che to be useful." "What tire in the Xuan level?" Hearing that the technique was another Xuan level Do techniques, the eyes of Xian lit up and he asked while licking his lips, "I think it was Xuan high level. I remember that the owner of this Do technique begged me to accept it. Even though I didn't have much interest in such things, he was really persistent, so I accepted and made appeal for him." Yao Lo carelessly said. His casual mentionings made the Xuan level Do technique seem like trash. "Xuan high level. Begging to give you it?" A few black lines appeared on the forehead of Xian. The technique, that was a whole tire higher than the top Do technique in the entire Z clan, was worthless in the eyes of Yao Lo. Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the huge difference. "Close your eyes and focus. I'll teach it to you." After ordering Xian, Yao Lo stretched out his finger and lightly tapped Xian's forehead. With a slight headache, Xian felt a huge amount of information flood into his brain. Octane Blast, Xuan high-level Do technique, close combat Do technique. Focus on attacks, and when mastered, attacks have 8 different forces that stack up and the power is equal to a D low-level Do technique. Slowly regaining his senses and quickly skimming over the new information, Xian let out a breath. The attack is equal to a D low-level Do technique. In the Do Che mainland, whether it's a Do technique or a Che method, the difference between a Xuan level technique and a D level technique was enormous. The D-level technique would be on a completely different level, and yet this Octane Blast claims that it can rival a D-level technique with its attack. Swallowing dryly, Xian's eyes became blank. "If I really learn this Do technique, then I can probably beat up Ning with my Duan Che. Don't be too greedy. Even though Octane Blast doesn't have high requirements of one's Do Che, it has a huge toll on the body. This technique is a close combat Do technique, and with your weak arms and legs, if you really try to use it, you'll probably end up with broken limbs before you even touch your opponent." Yao La's voice was like a bowl of cold water and washed away Xian's excitement. "How would I increase the strength of my body?" After pausing, Xian hurriedly asked. "Raising Do Che is the best way to increase the strength of one's body. With higher Do Che, the body will become stronger. Of course, if you want to go faster, then you would need some external stimulus." Yao La's eyes twinkled with mischief. "What external stimulus?" Watching the smiling Yao La, Xian suddenly felt a great danger. "Get beat up. The more you get beat up, the better." Yao Lo had a cold laugh, while Xiao had a stiff face. Chapter 19. Cruel Training. In the morning, a pale mist had shrouded the surrounding summit and lingered for a very long time. A gentle wind blew by and suddenly a physical grunt could be heard. Behind the summit, in a hidden groove, both of Xian's feet were inserted into the soil like tree stumps. His toes clung to the ground while he gnashed his teeth together and had cold sweat pour over his forehead. He only wore short pants and on his naked upper body were crisscrossed scars. Behind Xian was Yao Lao in spirit mode, cross-legged above a giant stone. His face was solemn as he gazed at Xian clenching his teeth to fight off the pain, and then his palm softly swung upwards. Following Yao Lao's palm, a red, materialized doche shot out from Yao Lao's palm. Just like a whip, it harshly smashed against Xian's shoulder, leaving behind a long bruise. As the corners of his mouth violently trembled, Xian inhaled cold air through the slivers between his teeth in response to the pain. Xian's shoulder numbed and a wave of scorching pain made its way to his heart. Under the brutal pain, Xian felt his feet soften and almost fell off balance. Under the violent pain, the original weak doche within Xian became more animated than before and quickly flowed through the chow pads and pressure points on Xian's shoulder. Strands of cool slowly seeped into his bones and quietly strengthened in the progress. Again, when the pain on his shoulder gradually faded away, Xian's young face was filled with persistence and stubbornness and yelled while clenching his teeth. Looking at persevering Xian, a gratified smile appeared on Yao Lao's withered face. Slightly nodded, a red materialized doche shot out from his palm again. Bang, bang, bang. Within the small forest, as strike after strike hit Xian, low grunts along with naked hits sounded. Every one of Yao Lao's attacks were at the exact point of maximum endurance for Xian's body. The attacks wouldn't harm Xian seriously, but still brought Xian the maximum pain possible. The pain from the doche lash caused an unbearable pain, forcing Xian's young face to contort in agony. On his body, with Yao Lao's swings, more and more crisscrossed scars appeared. Bang! Another materialized doche shot out and the wood stake-like Xian finally reached his limit. With weakened legs, he fell down paralyzed. Fiercely gasped for air, Xian wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and lifting his head up to make a rough smile, he asked, "Teacher, how was it?" "Not bad. You took 80 for doche lash today. That's a lot better than when you started out half a month ago and only able to take 9 lash." Yao Lao had a smile on his face and nodded. A glint of surprise flirted across his eyes. In the past half-month, the tenacity that Xian displayed was far beyond what was originally expected. For example, today, Yao Lao had originally thought that 70 doche lash was Xian's limit, but the latter had persevered to 84 lash. Yao Lao could not help but admire the spirit of Xian. After listening to Yao Lao's words, Xian let out a deep breath and slumped on the ground. When he regained feeling, he slowly crawled back up and put back on the clothing he had taken off and placed on a nearby rock. When wearing the clothes, whenever the cool fabric touched against the bruises, Xian winced and gritted his teeth. The transparent Yao Lao turned into a ray of light and disappeared within the black ring. Before disappearing, he left behind a phrase that he had said countless times: "Quickly go back and submerge yourself within the foundation elixir to make sure that the congested blood doesn't leave behind hidden wounds." Nodding, Xian finished putting on his clothes and left the forest. Once Xian finally made it back to his room while enduring the pain, he quickly took off his clothes once again and jumped into his wooden bowl of green liquid. The ice-cold green liquid alleviated the pains from the bruised skin, and Xian slowly closed his eyes, enjoying the soothing liquid flow over his skin. After a while, Xian's rushed breathing slowly calmed and even incorporated a couple of snores. After a painful beating, Xian couldn't take the fatigue on both his body and mental state and fell asleep. While Xian was asleep, the green liquid rippled slightly and slivers of peaceful energy quietly slipped into Xian's open pores. They washed away the lash of congested blood, and at the same time they revitalized and strengthened the muscles that were already at their utmost limit. While sleeping, Xian's body had been strengthened to a whole new level. While strengthening and repairing Xian's muscles, the green liquid slowly became lighter and lighter. Obviously, the energy in the liquid was decreasing. Unaware of how long he had fallen asleep, Xian only knew that the warm sunlight had already brightened his room when he woke up. Stretching out his body, his bones suddenly made rattling noises. When he lifted his head, he realized that his entire body was full of energy and power. Xian couldn't help but yell out, "Great!" As Xian stepped out from the wooden bowl, he unexpectedly discovered that the bowl of foundation elixir had already turned into transparent water from its originally green state. My elixir had already been used up. Scratching his nose, Xian helplessly shook his head. Suddenly recalling something, he happily closed his eye and carefully sensed his doche state. A moment later, Xian opened his eye and happily laughed. Finally, I'm at 5th Duanche. Chapter 20. Auction. To get to 4 Duanche in half a month, and then 5 Duanche in another month and a half. This incredible speed was impossible even for the old Xian. Even though at higher levels, raising one's Duanche becomes harder and harder, looking at the speed in which Xian is rising, it shouldn't be a problem for him to get to 7 Duanche by next year. Of course, this is under the assumption that Xian has enough foundation elixir, or else Xian would definitely die under the severe beatings that he endures every day before getting to 7 Duanche. After all, without the foundation elixir, Xian's weak body wouldn't ever be able to withstand the harmful effects of having congested blood and he would die. Therefore, what Xian needs to do right now is to buy more material for foundation elixir. Even though it sounds very easy, Xian has a slight problem. He's broke. Sitting on his bed, Xian has a bitter laugh. He had never thought that he would be in such an awkward situation because of money. While calculating, from last time, I still have 900 gold coins, but with only so much money, buying the same grade material as last time is not going to happen. Supporting his chin, Xian's eyes rolled quickly. Suddenly, he asked, "Teacher, for purple bluegrass of bone-washing flour, can we use younger stalks?" "Sure. But then the effects would be much weaker, and the foundation elixirs that I've been refining are tailored for you." Blinking his eyes, Xian smiled. "No problem. Let's use the worst grade material this time." "The worst grade? Then the effects would be horrible and you'd need at least half a year to get to the next Duanche." Yao Lao's voice showed his displeasure. He was probably furrowing his brows right now. "Don't have enough money. Go borrow from that girl again." With her background, even a couple 10,000 gold coins would be a small matter. Taking a step back, you can borrow from your dad. Why must you lower the effectiveness of the elixir and slow down your training speed? Hearing Yao Lao's suggestion, Xian shook his head. Just think of it as my self-respect stopping me from doing so. How can I keep on borrowing money from a girl? As for my dad, I've been avoiding him for 2 months now, and if he wants to know why I want the money, then wouldn't I have to expose you? Wait, teacher, this foundation elixir, can other people refine or make it? Suddenly thinking of something, Xian's brows jumped and he hurriedly asked, Hey, brat, in the Doche mainland, there are countless herbs, and within these herbs, you must find a combination that both calms the violent energy within monster cores and refine it so that one can absorb it. If you just randomly put herbs together, then the alchemy furnace breaking would be the least of your troubles. The energy might backfire. This foundation elixir was created after experimenting for a couple of years. Of course, there might be someone that also found out how to create it by luck, but the chances of that happening is almost non-existent. In addition, while refining, you must make sure that the fuse rate, amount used and fire temperature is perfect. You need to do countless experiments and have an incredible soul perception to do that. Or else, why do you think that every alchemist needs a teacher? To become a strong alchemist is impossible without a teacher guiding you. Just the time you spend trying out the different combinations of herbs would cost you your whole life. Therefore, I can't include the entire Doche mainland, but at least for GMO Empire, no one else has made a foundation elixir like mine. At this point, Yao Lao's voice incorporated a hint of pride. Surprised by the complexity in the seemingly simple foundation elixir, Xian instinctively licked his lips. When he looked at Yao Lao refining herbs, it all seemed so simple, but now with Yao Lao's explanation, he realized that the art of alchemy isn't as simple as what he had saw. The alchemy world is definitely huge and mysterious. No wonder an alchemist is the most honorable profession in the entire Doche mainland. But after his shock, Xian felt a tinge of glee. Teacher, I'm not going to use the horrible foundation elixir to train. Instead, I wanted to sell it in an auction. Even though I don't have much right now, after the foundation elixir is sold, then I'd have quite a bit, and at that point buying high quality material for the foundation elixir would be super easy. Right, I see. Sure. Alchemists selling their own pills isn't interesting news, and the foundation elixir is at the lowest level of training medicine, so selling it doesn't really matter. After thinking for a while, Yao Lo carelessly said. Hearing Yao Lao's agreement, Ziyan quickly got what he needed and rushed out of his room. Because Ziyan didn't need high-quality herbs, he carelessly picked the youngest purple bluegrass and bone-washing flower in the pharmacy, and as for the monster core, he brought the cheapest core he could find, the green wood mouse monster core. After buying all the medicine, Ziyan found a hidden alley and had Yao Lo refine the herbs into the foundation elixir. The foundation elixir this time not only had a much worse effect than last time, it even had a different color, going from a near-transparent jade green to mottled ugly green. After placing the pill that was the size of half of Ziyan's fist into a wild jade bottle that he had bought earlier, Ziyan finally let out a relaxed breath. After hiding the jade bottle securely, Ziyan left the alley and ran towards Wutan City's largest auction.